Welcome back to the workshop. Last week we left you with some tips to figure out if your knife is dull. This week we're going to take you through the sharpening process, just the first part, so that you have a good handle on where to start when sharpening your knife. Stay tuned. So last week we talked about looking down the edge of your blade to determine if there was light reflecting, and then resting your knife on a thumbnail or a Sharpie to see if there's any slipping and if your knife is dull. I'm going to show you some illustrations that outline a little bit of what we were seeing during those tests and what actually is happening to the edge of the blade, and then we'll dive into sharpening. So a sharp knife looks like this, essentially. This is a cross profile of the edge blade, or the edge of the blade. So it comes to a nice sharp point. You can see this is called the shoulder down here, and it's symmetrical. As you use your knife, the most fragile part is this very tip. And so as you use your knife, that tip rolls from one side, or it rolls to one side or the next. That tip then with heavy use will end up breaking off and leaving your knife with a dull or flat spot on it. So that's what we're looking for, is when light reflects from one side to the other, or if it slips and doesn't catch, we're dealing with one of those. Now when we sharpen, what we're doing is we're coming in contact with that blade and we're restoring an apex or a fine point. So this yellow dash represents the abrasive that comes in contact with the knife, and it's removing this material out here and restoring that edge. So the first step is to sharpen one side of the bevel. And I've represented that here with the silver line. And you sharpen and remove the material until you restore an apex. And that apex is symboled or signified by a burr. Now we will sharpen the other side, represented by this yellow line, and that would bring that apex back to center for a symmetrical, sharp edge. Let's get started. We'll walk through how to sharpen on this Aegis from SOG. This is their new Aegis AT, which is, I think, coming out real soon. So we got one of these. It's been a fun knife to use. We're going to sharpen it. So when we come in, most sharpeners are going to have a grit progression. And so if you haven't sharpened a knife on a certain system before, I would recommend usually starting on their more coarse grit. This is a 320 and diamond plate, and I've got an angle guide here that I'm going to use to keep a consistent angle throughout my stroke. Rest my knife on that guide, and I'm going to draw it across the abrasive. Depends on the condition of your knife, but what I'm looking for is to raise a burr, and that burr is going to form on the opposite side. So I sharpened with the side down, and that burr will form on the top. And when it forms, I should be able to feel it with my finger, and I'll show you that a little bit later. I'm probably going to do 5 or 10 strokes here, and I'm going to check for a burr along the full length of the blade. I'm now going to feel for a burr, and I can feel there with my finger. And I was messing around with this the other day, and I think I can hang a fish hook on the end of it. We'll see how strong of a burr I created. And that'll show you guys kind of what's actually happening with that metal. And we're leaving a little wire, a little hook on the end of that you'll be able to feel with a finger, and I can show here with a fish hook. So that's hanging on to that wire on the edge of the bevel. It shows me that I've reached the apex, and that as I sharpen the other side, I will be left with an incredibly sharp knife. Now when I switch over to the other side, I'm looking for that same thing. I should repeat the same number of strokes, and you should be left with a burr on the opposing side. And I can't stress the importance of a burr enough. The burr signifies that you've reached that apex, and you will be left with a sharp knife. If you're not getting a burr, there's a couple of things that could be happening. One, you might just need to go for a few more strokes. That's going to remove a little bit more material and bring that bevel edge closer to the other side. It could be that you're sharpening at a different angle than the manufacturer may have sharpened the knife to, and so I would recommend researching the manufacturer of the knife and figuring out what angle they sharpened to so that you can repeat that, which will result in sharpening the knife with the least amount of material removal. Once you have established a burr on the first side, repeat the strokes, you've got a burr on the second side, then we will hone that burr off and you'll be left with a great working edge. I'm going to save that for the next video, so tune in next week on Wednesday. That's it for this week from the workshop. See you next week. Thanks for tuning in this week. If you want to check out some of our previous videos, click the link here, or if you want to subscribe, click down here. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next week.